Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, the gear that's going to take you forward, soldier. We look at systems on offer at the recent AUSA conference, including updated sniper optics, targeting sights, and more. Plus, the evolution of drone warfare. How can the Army adapt to fight with and amidst fleets of cheap one-way UAVs? We talk to two experts. And we sit down with the Undersecretary of the Army. How could flexible funding get weapons into troops' hands faster? He walked through that and other topics. Also, I've been asking forever for someone to make a more mobile howitzer capable of ripping off around 30 seconds after its wheels stop rolling. Is this the answer? Finally, a conversation with the head of the Army Space and Missile Defense Command. Hear about one thing you might not think was on his mind. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. You can't go to a big defense conference without having a look at the latest and greatest on the show floor. So we packed up the gear and went looking for the most interesting stuff on offer at AUSA 2024. Improved sniper optics and handheld targeting sights for troops in the field and updated mini drones, those were just some of the items our own Todd South found at this year's show. Here he is with a roundup.
So here at the Association of the U.S. Army's annual meeting and exposition in Washington, D.C. And a lot of the things that really grab people's attention are the big platforms, of course, new armored vehicles, new autonomous vehicles, larger and more capable drones. But what the soldiers wear, what those hundreds of thousands of soldiers wear, use to get their mission done, is seeing some really high-tech upgrades. A lot of those are coming through the Program Executive Office Soldier, which is an office at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, that the Army uses to basically test and approve new gear before it gets fielded, and then train soldiers on that gear. Some of the updates we're seeing this year is the well-known Black Hornet. It's a soldier-borne sensor, basically a palm-sized little micro drone. Think of a tiny helicopter. Really can truly fit in your pocket. Now that system's been out for a number of years, but a new upgrade that they're doing now that could be released as early as next year to the regular soldier is a combined system. Right now, in daytime, you have to use one platform, one helicopter, then you got to take your payload off and use a different payload on that same little mini micro drone helicopter for a night mission. The new mission will combine both and offer a little bit more payload capability, basically adding different types of sensors or packages you can just swap in and out on that micro drone. Now, that's the Black Hornet. Teledyne FLIR is actually already developed a new type of larger, even more capable drone that the Army may consider for future projects called the Black Recon. Now that particular drone device is here on display, a little bit larger, a little more capabilities, a little more distance, battery duration, those types of things that soldiers are going to need for scouting out locations, especially at the squad level. Beyond small drones, snipers are getting some upgrades too. They have the Storm Optic, which feeds ballistic information from a ballistics computer into the actual optic that the sniper's using, so they don't have to look away at another device. That's getting upgraded with even more capabilities in the Storm 2 optic, now being developed by L3Harris Technologies. L3Harris also does the ENVG Bravo. Now that's been out for a number of years as well, but it's still seeing improvements. The ENVG Bravo, the Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular, is the first binocular device for night vision fielded to the vast numbers of the force. Of course, Special Operations has had dual tube binocular type night vision for years, but the standard foot soldier in any infantry unit is going to be receiving those if they've not already got them. And the new EMG Bravos are getting software upgrades, getting new features added to them as they roll along. Also another L3Harris technology product. In addition to that, some of the targeting activities that they do, the joint effects targeting system and the laser target locator module, two key things that scouts have used and other reconnaissance and forward observers have used for call for fire, for marking locations. Those are getting smaller and in new packages and being developed by Program of Executive Office Soldier for those particular types of missions. They've been airdrop tested, they've been fielded in certain versions, and those versions continue to improve as we see that. Now, one thing that people are very familiar with that's going to see a small upgrade is the Net Warrior software package. Now that is actually housed on an Android device, usually chest mounted by the soldier. They use a Samsung Galaxy phone. They're upgrading to the newest version of that phone available for testing in the coming year, so there'll be faster features, more data capabilities within the Net Warrior program that's used by a lot of soldiers on many systems, but primarily on the Android smartphone device or a tablet. those are a few of the high-tech options, everything from optics to micro drone helicopters, that you can fit in your pocket, to new software type upgrades, new devices to run that software to help connect soldiers with all the devices, all the work that they're doing in the field. So these are a few of the tech options here on display, many of them upgrades of existing equipment, some new improvements, and we're going to see those rolling out over the next year or two as they get through the Army's process for testing and fielding. This is Todd South with Army Times Defense News.
If there's one thing both boots on the ground and generals in the Pentagon worry about with the same fervor, it's the rapid evolution of cheap, deadly drones that can now dominate a battlefield. As leaders and innovators grapple with both how to defend against those swarms and employ their own version of the capability, experts are working on how the U.S. can keep up. For a conversation on the topic, Defense News' Jen Judson sat down with a pair of leaders to hear their latest thinking. Here's some of their conversation.
Talk a little bit about some of the hurdles and challenges that are getting in the way of U.S. defense being able to adopt attritable drones en masse, manufacture them quickly, they're cheap. And what are some of the things that, in Ukraine, for instance, they're able to manufacture tons and they're supplying them from all over the place. What are some of the things that they don't have to adhere to that maybe, are roadblocks for us?
There's a very important psychological effect here, and that is United States has very expensive but excellent systems that no one else has, and we can build them out to any capability, but they are going to be expensive, and losing that expensive platform in a test, in evaluation, in a test run is scary for a lot of unit commanders, or even developers themselves. In some of the articles we're getting right now about Army testing and evaluation of certain drone technologies based on the war in Ukraine, the issue is we don't have enough small tactical drones. Those that we do have tend to be relatively expensive. So again, losing that system has consequences and a paper trail and so on and so forth. That's not the case in Ukraine. A drone is used, is lost, it is replaced again and again.
I was just a battalion commander. If we lose a system, we're virtually launching the trap. I'm sure there's people standing around the audience right now, like if a Puma goes down in Iraq or Afghanistan, you launch the trap because it was on your CMR, right? Like that's not the case. Like I was signed for that. And it's also how we're building things, and it's some of what we're putting on ourselves. So there are certain levels of systems that we're procuring that are NAMP compliant, like an F-18. The price point for one of the cheaper systems, at least for the Marine Corps, for a quadcopter is around $41K. The price point for a FPV system that can reasonably take out a T-90 with a good pilot is between $600 and $800 on the high side. So that's a huge shift, and Sam hit it. It's both a cultural thing, and it's both what we have a super mature Air Force, and what effect does that have, and how does that culture of how we tend towards those larger programs, how does that bleed into this space, which has taken the back seat for a long time, really since 1918 when the first Kettering bug flew over the trench to solve the same operational problem. They've been around forever. Integrating them and not deconflicting them, that's that's going to start here just as much as it starts on how you budget for them.
What are some things that you're seeing from industry in terms of adapting to this idea of being able to mass produce on the cheap drones, so that the U.S. forces have capability in mass, which is what they really need?
Certainly at AUSA, if you walk around, you see a lot more smaller tactical systems. You see a lot more systems which are cheaper, in the tens of thousands of dollars, fulfilling maybe the same mission requirement as the ones in Ukraine combat at a few $100s, but still, going from $1 million to just a few tens of thousands of dollars is relatively cheap for the United States military. So you see a lot more of these type of systems at this specific forum. And you also, if you talk to a lot of vendors, if you talk to developers, those who exhibit, and you ask, have you actually tried the system out in Ukraine? Are you going to do that? Are you building a relationship with someone in Ukraine so you can try it out in combat? And the answer tends to be yes or maybe, which is, again, a major shift.
When you start tying demands from industry to the way the military fights, And you hear a lot of pushback from two different sides. On the one side, you'll hear there's no requirement for that. No one's written the requirement for that. And then the real bureaucratic insurgents will say something like there's no task for that. That's internal to the service. There is no task that is reportable through DERS that compels today a commander to integrate at scale the number of systems to alter the way that our doctrine is used.
When we come back, a new take on an old favorite. Meet BAE Systems Archer. That and more when we return. Welcome back. The AUSA show floor boasts a wealth of emerging tech that comes in all shapes and sizes. One of the largest systems on display this year was the Archer howitzer, a product developed by BAE Systems specifically for the Swedish Army. Now, the company is making a push to market the mobile artillery system to the US Army. We stopped by the booth to learn more about its capabilities. Check it out.
Hi, my name is Jim Miller. I am the Vice President of Business Development for Combat Mission Systems inside BAE Systems Inc. Here at the AUSA show, behind me is the Archer howitzer. It is specifically designed for the Swedish Army, but has had proven use around the world. Currently in the UK Army as well, but most importantly, maybe it's in Ukraine, in combat. The Army's making a decision now about how to replace some of their towed howitzers, and they're looking at mobile howitzers. And one of the things that is really good about the Archer is it is very mobile. It can move anywhere. It's modular so that we can adjust it to a different truck based on the Army's needs. So if one truck is too small or too large, the modularity of the system allows us to move it to a truck. If you don't want a European truck, can we use a US truck? And I think that's an advantage as the Army starts to think about how to replace a lighter howitzer that has more mobility because it can be carried under helicopters and on smaller airplanes. Can we get it to where the Army needs it through that modularity? And certainly that's a big advantage. Safety is a big deal in artillery. I mean, there's no doubt about that, because the way artillery goes into action and shoots above everybody. The crew of this vehicle is completely protected. It's a small crew. They're in the cab of the truck. The armor on the truck is sufficient to protect them against small to medium-sized fire if they get too close to something. It's also going to allow them to survive against any counterfire artillery that comes back at them. But the most survivable thing about this is the fact that this gun can be moving anywhere down a road. It can pull off the road, and in 30 seconds it can be firing. And it can fire 4 or 5 rounds, and before those rounds begin to impact on the target, everything's boxed up, put away, and on the road again in less than 30 seconds. And so when you're talking about survivability, when you shoot, people see you through radars or whatever, and if you can do that quickly and get out of the way, you're going to be much more survivable. What we're seeing in Ukraine, where the threat is more about UASs and an air threat, the ability to move at high speed and kind of raid in from a great distance, raid in, shoot your mission, and get out of Dodge as quickly as you can and move a great distance at high speed allows you to survive against a UAS threat as well. So those are the primary benefits of this vehicle, is the speed, maneuverability, and then if you get too close to something, the crew's gonna survive because they're in an armored cab. 52 caliber gun on this, 21 rounds in the magazine, so you can shoot at 52 caliber ranges, so you're talking in excess of what we currently have in the US Army. Ranges at 40 kilometers, maybe out to 50 kilometers, depending on the munition. So the volume of fire you can generate with 21 rounds in the magazine, ability to reload it very quickly, and continue to move from place to place and survive, makes this howitzer an excellent choice for this Army, I think. The price advantage you see on a fielded system is it's already been developed, it's already been tested, the transition to production's already been bought and paid for, and when the vehicle is in production, it's cheaper than when it's in development. And so it really would give the Army an advantage to move very quickly, kind of do it off the shelf, buy it as it is, move out, and transform in contact with good soldier feedback. So I think it's a great opportunity for the Army to do something very quick.
We know, it's not as saucy as the fast-shooting howitzer or the nifty sniper optics, but defense funding, as dry as it can sound, is the very foundation of how weapons and systems get to troops in the field. In an era where warfare is changing rapidly, from command and control networks to rapid fielding of drone capabilities, changing the archaic way the U.S. funds its defense systems has to change too. Should it really take 2 full years or more to get money for new counter-drone tech? Undersecretary of the Army Gabe Camarillo joined us at AUSA to talk about the need for flexible funding.
You are looking at doing more flexible funding. In discussions with Congress, do you think you're making progress in this becoming a reality for the next budget cycle? And how do you see that potentially progressing if this works? What are some of the other areas you might want to tackle for flexible funding?
You have built into our appropriation process a projection of what our requirements are going to be 2 years ahead of the game. And if there's a CR, there could be longer than a 2-year wait time until you get the resources to be able to do what you planned to do 2 years ago. So a lot of what we're asking for is flexibility we're going to propose in the 26 budget submission, mostly in those 3 areas you mentioned, by consolidating budget line items. So what does that mean? Across the various programs of record and areas of spend that we have in EW, counter-UAS, and UAS, what we hope to do is to have enough flexibility within how those budget lines are structured that when we're in the year of execution, when the 26 appropriation gets passed, we'll have enough flexibility that we don't necessarily have to go to a reprogramming. And that will mean a significant amount of time savings and the ability to compete and bring in new technology very quickly. The feedback we've gotten from the Hill has been very promising to date. I think a lot of members recognize that we need to do something different, just given the constraints of our budget process. They also recognize at the Appropriations and Authorization Committee staff level that there's a need to try out new approaches. Rather than asking to do it across a wide section of the Army's budget, we came up with 3 use cases that we think illustrate the need to go fast and give us a good example of where we could use this authority. What we're working on right now with the committees is discussions about how we can ensure that we maintain proper oversight for Congress and how the money gets spent at the same time that we have the flexibility without having to necessarily go through a reprogramming process.
When we come back, our personal finance advisor is back with her latest tips. Don't go away. Welcome back. Did you know that tracking your auto maintenance costs is important? Time to check those receipts. On this episode of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest tips.
Whether your car is new, used, or a classic vintage, it's important to keep track of all the repairs and maintenance you've performed on your car. It may seem old school to keep all that paper, but believe it or not, those records are the keys to preventing hassles and higher expenses over the long haul. So do yourself the huge favor of keeping every receipt for maintenance and repairs in a special folder in a safe place. The most important papers connected to your car might be the warranty documents, which will become vital as your car gets older, closer to the warranty expiration, or when you need repairs. They can help prove what's still covered so you won't have to pay for major breakdowns or even routine maintenance. Finally, make sure you stick to a schedule. Regular oil changes, tire rotations, and brake inspections could prolong the life of your car and save you money over time. So much so that if and when you decide to sell your car, your diligence and amazing record keeping could add peace of mind for the buyer and a boost to your bottom line.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, point your personal A10 at militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most informed pilot on the flight deck, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And just like most junior troops, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. After the break, the surprising topic of concern for the head of the Army Space and Missile Defense Command. Stay tuned to find out what it is. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. Before Lieutenant General Sean Gainey was the head of the Army's Space and Missile Defense Command, he was the force's chief counter-UAS commander. So what's on his mind in this new role? Well, drones, of course. Specifically, how the Army plans to defend the assets under the Space and Missile Command from attacking UAS systems. Here he is with our own Jed Judson at AUSA about that and other topics. Have a look.
I know we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask about the lower tier, aerial tier of threats that you are needing to look at. Counter UAS. I know there's a proof of concept at Fort Greely in progress, and soldiers are sort of training and experimenting with counter UAS systems to defend missile defense complex. So can you talk about what you're doing there and how that's going?
Yeah, so it's not a coincidence that in my last job I was the Joint Counter UAS office, and
it's a good transition.
and Northcom is looking to exude more influence in the counter UAS. So what an opportunity! You take a strategic site, you take capability that's been developed within the Army in a Joint Counter UAS office, and you provide it to a commander who's very familiar with the capabilities and challenges around it, and then you implement it. And so I went to the Army and the Northcom commander and said, hey, what a great opportunity we have here to really validate a capability architecture in the homeland where there's so many challenges in the homeland. But our biggest challenge in the homeland is not so much capability, it's authorities to leverage that capability and what type of capability you can use. And so we've challenged that, and we've pushed the envelope a little bit, and we've pushed some of the authorities and specifically the 130I authority, and worked closely with Northcom, where General Gio has embraced this, and under his umbrella, we're employing capability that's not employed. For example, we're employing a CURS radar. You'll find that radar nowhere but CENTCOM right now. We're employing low collateral interceptor, the drone hunter. This was a capability that was used in some of our countries for some of their events, and it's now providing a soft kinetic capability to capture these drones and take them to a place of our choosing, taking another racing drone with a capture system, capture that drone. So we're doing things differently in that location to be able to provide feedback. So what I can tell you is we've done our validation exercise. Our operators were 6 of 6 capturing, with our drone hunter, capturing replicated threat drones. And so we're up and operational, ready to begin operations to feed that into Northcom, to General Gio, and then to hopefully validate this concept, and then to allow to tailor that type of force as we move forward.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.